based out of Connecticut at that time. Now, true to history, probably what happened, and I can't find proof of this either way, but probably what happened was they ordered the clock and it was sent by train to Spokane, and then somebody in Spokane actually installed the clock. But I thought, here's a loophole in history, and that's what I love to do, is find those little crevices in history and figure out where can I stick my story, right? Where can I breathe life into history and remind us that they are real living people, even back then, right? They had the same issues, the same problems, the same dreams, the same prayers and aspirations, right? And so there was no listed clockmaker for the clock tower, and so Archie Prescott came to be. And he is my main character for the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries. So it all begins with Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker. That's the first one. Archie Prescott comes to Spokane from Connecticut to install the clock in the Spokane Clock Tower for the Great Northern Railroad Depot, which has just broken ground and started being built in May of 1901. So this one is actually in April of 1901, right before. So they're just finalizing things. They're just about to break ground, all of that. Because I realized if I focused on the Spokane Clock Tower, then it took them about a year to build the entire clock, starting in May when they broke ground, and then it gets dedicated in June, in end of May, beginning of June of 1902. And I thought, well, there you go. That's 12 months, give or take, about 13. So we're going to end up with a 13 baker's dozen for this series. So each book takes place in one of the months of 1901, and then we'll go into 1902 as they're building the clock tower. And we check in with Archie at each one of those and find out where are they at, what are they working on now. And that just became the trunk of my novel, of my whole series. And from there, the branches just came off, and it has written itself, because Spokane's history in 1901 is just incredible. And so little of it has been written about, at least in the fictional capacity. Now, that being said, I could not have done this without the help of people like the Beaumontis, who have written incredible secondhand research books. Life Behind the Badge by Beaumonti and the Spokane Historical Society. They all work together, and I've had so much help from the Ferris Archives and just people like that just really reaching out to me and saying, hey, did you know this about the Spokane Clock Tower? Or, hey, I just discovered that this happened in 1901. For example, the second book in the series, Cupboards All Bared, came about because I stumbled across an article published in the Spokesman Review, as one does when we are flipping through 1901 articles, that said that the Campbells of the Campbell House, which we all know and love here in Spokane, they were set to host President McKinley when he came through Spokane in 1901. Now, we all know what happened to President McKinley in September, and if you don't, spoiler alert, too late, it's history, he gets assassinated. But before that, he was supposed to come to Spokane, and then he canceled his plans. This is true to history. He canceled his plans and said it was because his wife's health was failing. So they turned around and went a different direction. They went back home. But what if it was because the assassination plot that happened in September was due to happen in Spokane? So another one of those crevices in history, I was able to set that up. And then we get the Campbells as the lead suspects. Of course, we all know they didn't do it. But people who are not familiar with Spokane do not know that. And so many of them think Mesa did it, and it's just wonderful. So this one was really fun because I was able to uncover all sorts of things about the Campbells that you might not have heard from the docents when you go there. So the Ferris Archives has incredible research. Original letters, so I was able to find like actual letters from Mesa where he talks about, oh, we're going to host the president and I guess we can take care of him, and things like that in just passing. So I'll be going more in depth into this book if you want to hear more. Tomorrow I will be at the Campbell House doing a presentation and a live walkthrough of and tour of the Campbell House, and going in a little bit more into the history behind this book in particular, but all of the books in general. So that'll be tomorrow at noon, if you want to join me there. So then in the third book, we have Crazy Maids in a Row. So they're all twists on fairy tales, or twists on nursery rhymes from the time period. And so this crazy maids in a row. And in this one, we end up going to the Medical Lake Asylum, or the Eastern Washington Hospital for the Insane. But nobody called it that. In the newspapers, it was always called the Medical Lake Asylum. And so we end up going there, and I was able to find the actual handbook for the asylum at that time. And so again, it just wrote itself. It was just an incredible piece of history that I was able to uncover. There were a lot of things happening there that probably shouldn't have been happening. And so it naturally fell into place. So these 3 books are just the first 3 in the series. Like I said, I have 13 plans. And each one features a different location in Spokane. And I'm sorry, this is clattering a lot. This is my chatelaine. And so women in 1901 and previous to that would wear a chatelaine, which is basically their keeper of the keys, right? So they have everything that they need. I do have a character, well, yeah, I'll get into that later. So the first 3 books, I tried to really focus on places that you could actually still visit in Spokane, right? Because most of my readers are actually not from Spokane. I have readers in Australia, Canada, England, New York, all over the place. And so I even included in book 2, I had to have a Hermione moment, right? A moment where I explained that it is not Spokane, it is Spokane. Because one of the first interviews I did with somebody who was not familiar just called it the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries. Okay. And the audiobooks are all read by Rebecca Cook, who is a local Spokaneite. You might have met her as Hulda at the Christmas Campbell House. And she's wonderful, and I spoke to her beforehand and said, okay, I want this character to mispronounce it as Spokane the entire first half of the book, and then I'm going to have a character correct him. So she gets it right in the audiobooks too. So each book features locations that I hope that you could actually visit, because I thought, okay, if they're not familiar with Spokane and they're like, ooh, I want to go check out Spokane now, I want to go do a road trip, I want them to be able to go see the clock tower, go to the Campbell House, go to, in book 2, we go to the Montvale Hotel, because I wanted to feature a hotel in Spokane. I needed them to stay somewhere, and I thought, oh, I'll put them up at the Davenport. Except the Davenport wasn't built as a hotel until 1914. So that couldn't happen. You could stay at the restaurant, but that wouldn't really work too well. But then I discovered that the Montvale, which still exists, and is now a beautiful boutique hotel, has not changed that much on the inside. The interior is still very similar to the original arrangement, and it was in existence in 1901. So I was able to put them up there so that way people could come to Spokane, stay at the Montvale, tour the Campbell House, and get a first-hand look at like the murder scene. The body is found in Hangman Creek in book 2, and then they walk from Overlook Park over to the Campbell House. So if you're familiar with that, you can actually walk the crime scene and walk back, and I thought that was just really cool. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me into the Eastern Washington Hospital because, reasons. But thanks to... Yeah, right. Well, I could probably get in, but I might not be able to get out, right?
My daughter works there.
Oh, well, next time. But thanks to the Sanborn maps and things like that from this era, I was able to piece together what it actually looked like on the inside. So I try to do really deep descriptions of all of these locations so you can walk through them. Things like City Hall at that time, I was like, oh great, I can feature actual City Hall or the old City Hall that you can go walk through. Nope, in 1901, it was the one that was located where the Louvre Carousel is now. And so it doesn't exist anymore, but again, it's a beautiful building, it's incredible. And it housed the police, the fire station, all those sorts of things. And so I was like, okay, the Louvre Carousel. Nope, that was built in 1904. So even when we go to Nat Park in my next book, which is book 4, and SCORE stood for, so it's going to be featuring baseball and gambling, because we've got, of course, Dutch Jake at the Coeur d'Alene Casino and Hotel, and then I discovered Doc Brown was the owner of the Spokane baseball team at the time. Turns out in 1901, what would become the future of the Spokane Indians started in 1901, and so it was just joining the American League. It was the Pacific Northwest League first, and then it joins the other one later. And there was a lot of interesting stuff happening. They switched captains several times for some reason, and it was just, there's a lot of things there. Lots of crevices in history for me to play with. So it turns out 1901 has been the perfect time period to feature, even though I haven't been able to use things like the Davenport and the Louvre Carousel. There have been plenty of other things that maybe are even lesser known, and be able to feature those in those books. So Again, if you want to learn more, I'm doing another talk tomorrow. Okay, and then, we moved to Colorado Springs a year ago. We had to leave Spokane, and we ended up in Colorado Springs, and I thought, okay, well, I need a series that's not in Spokane, so that way I can jump in between the two of them. And that's what led me to Anna Katharine Green. So Anna Katharine Green is the mother of detective fiction, and she's a forgotten female. She is often overlooked. She inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. She wrote her book, published it 9 years before Sherlock hit the scene. And I discovered her through Agatha Christie's autobiography, as one does, because I'm a mystery author, and so of course I read Agatha Christie. I was reading her autobiography about how she wrote, and she was inspired by Anna Katharine Green's first book, The Leavenworth Case, which was published in 1878. So through a series of articles and doing more research, I discovered she was the Agatha Christie of her day. She was incredibly famous. She went worldwide. When Sir Arthur Conan Doyle came to America, he met Anna Katharine Green. He wanted to meet her in person, shake her hand, the woman that inspired him to write his detective, and yet nobody's heard of her. Absolutely a forgotten female. And so I did some more research, and again, just like Spokane, nobody had written a historical mystery about her. In fact, nobody had written historical fiction. There's only one published biography about her, actually written by another Patricia Meredith, but that was published back in 1988, I think it is. But thanks to her, she had uncovered this incredible list of this bibliography in the back of research, and so I was able to uncover a lot more about her, and so this first book, A Deed of Dreadful Note, is about Anna Katharine Green writing her first mystery, her debut mystery that would inspire the mystery genre itself. It's called The Leavenworth Case. You may have heard of it. Sometimes Mystery Mag will write an article about it. Other authors will talk about, oh yeah, The Leavenworth Case, but they mention it in passing. It is incredibly influential. She is not the first woman to write detective fiction. There was a woman who published before her. But during her time period, nobody knew that this other woman was a woman because she wrote under a pseudonym. And she only published one book. It was called The Dead Letter. And we know today that it was written by, oh my gosh, I'm blank on her name. You can look it up. It's like Meta Fuller or something like that. I have an entire timeline on my website of the history of mystery fiction. Before and after Anna Katharine Green, because I wanted to show where she falls. And she falls right at the beginning. There's Poe, who's writing Dupin, and then there's Gaboriau, who writes Lecoq, and he's French. And again, Dupin is French. He's not an American detective, even though Edgar Allan Poe is an American. And then we've got Wilkie Collins writing The Moonstone, and Dickens has Inspector Bucket, things like that, but there's no American detective. So not only is she the first female author of American detective fiction, she introduces the first American detective, and he is a flawed detective. He has rheumatism, just like a future Sherlock would have, and he's very, well, the term that we would use today is he's autistic. But at that point in time, they didn't have that term. But he avoids eye contact. He's very focused on details around him. He doesn't enjoy glad-handing people. And he's very Columbo. He's very, he kind of walks in disheveled, and Inspector Gryce, everybody just kind of takes him, okay, he's just that guy over there. And then they'll say things in front of him, and then he figures it out. So he's a wonderful, wonderful character. So Detective Gryce is his name. And so she invented all of that, and then invented lots of the cliches and tropes and things that we find in mystery fiction. It all started with her. And she brought them all together. And very famous during her time, so thankfully there's lots of articles interviewing her and talking about her. And so she's fascinating. And so I uncovered all of this, realized nobody had written about her, so I said, why not me? We have a lot in common. And including being a mom. I'm a mom of 2 kids. She had 3 kids, so married with kids, a Christian. She's very very close with her parents, and with her father and her stepmother. And then a lot of her writing process is very similar to mine, because of course she's being interviewed all the time. So she talks about how she wrote her first book. And so again, this book basically wrote itself. But we get to follow her writing her first book and solving a case with her father, which is true to life, that she did do that. But this particular case is inspired by the Leavenworth case. but in the book, she's being inspired by the case to write the Leavenworth case. But actually, I was inspired by the Leavenworth case to write my book. So it all works together. And it was so much fun to write this book. So this is the first book in a new series, the Anna Catherine Green Mysteries. And I don't know how many is going to be in this series yet. I'm just moving forward down her timeline and figuring out where I want to have those high points. And I know we will end with her meeting Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and maybe hearing about this new author that's sprung up and is doing great things over in England named Agatha Christie. Because it happened just as she was ending her life and ending her publication journey. Agatha Christie took the scene. So kind of a passing of the baton. So that'll be a hard one to write. But until then, we have lots of great adventures with her. She published 36 books in her lifetime, several plays, and at least 2 books of poetry. She wanted to be a poetess, ended up writing mystery, and in fact, her epigraph was about how she wanted to be a poetess, and then she changed mystery fiction. And yeah, it's just incredible. So I highly recommend Adita Dreadful Note, and then I highly recommend you pick up the Leavenworth case and read that, because that's my ultimate goal, is to guide you back to Anna Catherine Green. In fact, we released an ebook version of it. You can get it for free through my website. It's got an introduction by me, ties it back into the book. And then we released an audiobook read by my husband, Andrew D. Meredith, who's an audiobook narrator. And he did a wonderful reading of it, so that way now you can listen to it too, because it's very hard to find audiobooks of it. In fact, if you go into Auntie's and ask for a copy of Leavenworth's Case, they'll probably have to order it in for you. And they probably will have a very hard time even finding the other books. Usually the first book you can find, that's the one that she's still known for. But her other books have mostly been lost. They're slowly being uncovered, and I hope to be part of that hunt. So, and then my newest book, this is my arc, so I can share this with you because you guys are authors, so you know how this is. The back is not perfect. It's a little bit too close for me, so I'm getting a second arc delivered while we're gone. But this is my newest series, Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman, a Sam Shovel mystery. And this is not historical fiction. This is my first cozy mystery, and this will be a series of Christmas mysteries featuring Sam Shovel. So Sam Shovel is inspired by Sam Spade, and he is a talking snowman who comes to life once a year at the North Pole for 12 days of Christmas. And this year, Mr. O. Tannenbaum, the leading salesman of Christmas trees at the North Pole, has been found dead. And who should bring him to his attention other than the Sugar Plum Fairy, the femme fatale of them all? And then he has to work with Nick and Nora Claus, because I can't believe nobody's ever done that before. Nick and Nora Claus, who are the head Santas, and they are over the Santa franchise. And so there's different Santas in every country, and they all have to meet together once a year, and they all happen to be there when Mr. O. Tannenbaum was found dead. So it's very fun, it's very light, it's very cozy, and it still required a lot of research because I really enjoyed digging up all these different myths of Santa Claus and the North Pole and different Christmas traditions, and introducing people to just totally different things because, yeah. And this book came out of my husband writes fantasy, and so I thought, man, you're so lucky you don't have to do research. You get to just make stuff up. And no, it's not like that. And I enjoy research way too much. So I started researching, and that inspired my world, which, of course, then he was like, oh, yeah, you're looking at moon cycles? I do that, too. But this has been really fun. And again, this one probably will be the first in just like, every couple Christmases, maybe every Christmas, we'll see. I'll be releasing a new book in this series. So I now have 3 series, and I'm homeschooling and teaching my kids and at home, and so full-time publishing all the time, and it's been a whirlwind. So we're here for our book tour this week. I'm at the Campbell House tomorrow, and then and I just got back off a KYRS interview on the radio. And I've got a bunch of events. I'm actually going out to Medical Lake High School to speak with the students there and run a workshop with them for writing. It's been an incredible journey. So, little 9-year-old me couldn't even believe it. So, I think that's all I have for now. And then questions and yeah.
Are you self-published? Is that?
I am. Yes. Yeah. So my background is in editing. I graduated from Whitworth with a creative writing degree, and then went off to be an editor of science fiction and fantasy novels for a game publishing company. They wanted to publish books in their IPs, in their intellectual properties. While I was there, I got to work with George R.R. Martin on an art book. So I have met him in person, and then I've gotten to work with other New York Times best-selling authors. And at that time, this was 2010, about that time period, and when I worked with these authors, and I would say, hey, I want to write books, so many of them said, you know what, if I had it to do over again, I would go indie. I would be an independent publisher. And I found that really interesting. And so many of them had issues with their agents and issues with, because these are traditionally published authors, right? To be a New York Times bestselling author, especially in 2010, you had to be traditionally published. Well, I was picking up all of these skills, right? I was running the fiction department of this game publishing company, so I knew how to lay it out. I knew how to hire somebody to do the cover, or maybe even design it myself. And so I continued on that journey, learned a lot. I'm an editor, and so I know the first rule of editing is never edit your own book. And so I started reaching out to friends. I have connections through Whitworth with fellow graduates of there. My editor is Corin Faya, who graduated with me, and so he and I trade books. I edit his books, and he edits mine, and it's a good workout. So, and then just meeting people along the way and learning more about the process. But I really didn't dive into independent publishing. I just thought, well, you know what? I know how hard it is because I've done all of that. And so I really want to go the traditional route. So I pursued getting an agent. I had an agent, had her for a year, and then COVID hit. Yeah. And, the world changed. It turned upside down. Publishing stopped completely, wouldn't hire anybody. And my agent was, grasping at straws, trying to get anything moving forward. And I said, you know what? I have the skills. I'm just going to go do it. I'm just going to do it myself. I'm sick of waiting. It's been 4 years sitting on Butcher Baker Candlestick Caker. I know it's worth reading. I'm going to get it out there. I'm just going to do it myself. And luckily during COVID, a bunch of new companies started, like Draft Digital and Find Away Voices, and KDP really took off. And so I was like, okay, Ingram started Ingram Spark and had a little bit more access for independent publishers. And so finding those avenues, I was like, okay, well, Draft Digital is ebook, Find Away Voices is audiobook, Ingram Spark is print, so I can do all three myself. I can upload them myself. I just have to do all the other work behind the scenes, right? And thankfully, I'm married to an incredible man who can do half of that for me. So he does my covers, though actually a couple of these I did myself. And then, like I said, I have a friend who's an editor. Andrew does audiobooks. So he was like, you know what? I'll learn how to do the audiobooks. You do the editing and the layout and everything. And together we have been on an incredible journey for, 4 years now? Yeah. So we have 10 books total. We each have 5 books. We've been publishing together, but in totally different genres. So that's been really interesting and really fun. And we have incredible discussions and are able to just really dive into the publishing world. So 5 books. Our goal is 2 books a year for each of us. So 4 books a year. And when I think of it that way, I'm like, wow, yeah. We're kind of crazy. Yeah. But at the same time, like I said, I'm homeschooling, and so my kids are writing books. I am not going to Paolini them and publish them ahead of time, but they will be learning right alongside us. They're learning so much about the publishing industry, and we've made some incredible friends on YouTube, and we've been doing interviews constantly and just talking about our books and doing things like this and inspiring other authors. So. I love talking about publishing, and it's been an incredible journey and totally worth it.
What age did you start writing the book?
Writing my books. So these ones, from age 9, I started writing children's books. And I wrote children's books for a long time. Even when I was an editor, that was easy enough for me to just write them. Self-publishing children's books I found is really, really hard. It's really hard to make those connections. So in, when did I start Butcher Baker? 2019?
You started it again was 2017.
Yeah, 2017. 2017 is when I went to the Campbell House and I discovered, okay, I'm going to research this and do this. It was like 3 years of research before I actually had it, because then I had an agent, and then 2021 is when I ended up actually pushing the self-pub button. So the first book took what is that, like 5-7 years. It took a long time. But then the second book happened in a year, and then the third book happened in 6 months. Because once I had I knew what I was doing. But this is my process. This is I'm going to research. I'm going to outline. I'm going to research some more, and then I'm going to write my book. And then I had my my beta readers in place, and how to do the huge learning curve that was doing my own ebooks and audiobooks and everything. And so now it's a much easier process. But same with like Deed of Dreadful No, I wrote that 4 years ago. So it's been 4 years of research to get that first one done. But I hope the next ones won't take as long. We'll see. So, yeah, it's a long process, but I love it.
Good. Good.
Any more questions?
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about starting your own publishing company?
We have talked about that, especially with both of us publishing. Basically, if we ever did that, we would start with friends. Like I said, my editor is writing his own books, and so I'm going to edit his books. And so we've offered, hey, how about in exchange, since he has now edited 5 of my books, and he hasn't published one yet, like he would be one of the first people that we would publish. I know a lot of indies have started doing that. You start by starting your own company. You're like, okay, I've done the learning curve. Now I know how to do it, right? So yeah, I'll sell my services, and I would love to help other authors. We've made a lot of connections along the road. So we've been able to, Andrew's been doing audiobooks for other authors, and yeah, we're excited. That'll be eventually. I don't know if we're ready for that just yet. Right now, we're still, I feel like when my kids are older, when my kids are older, I'll be able to take on more work from other people, but
I have
yeah.
one more.
Yeah.
So what are your major marketing strategies?
Major marketing strategies. So I would say our main one is YouTube. We both have social media. Andrew's on Twitter. I am not. I am on Instagram mostly. And then through Instagram, I started meeting people off of YouTube, and I started watching all these great booktubers, and they were interviewing authors, and so I started putting my name out, sending my book in. Hey, you have a mystery channel. I think that you would like my book. And through that's been incredible. If they like my first book, they go out and they buy every book that I write, which has been amazing. And then they have me on and they interview me. And so this year I started my own YouTube channel because I have so much history, so much research behind all this, right? And the first rule of historical research is you can't use it all, right? There's no way to incorporate it all into your book. At least, yeah, you shouldn't incorporate it all into your book. So you have to, lightly sprinkle it through. So I started a blog several years ago. And then just with the internet, I've been finding that less people read blogs and more people watch YouTube. So I've been trying to move more of that, me reading those things. And then on YouTube, I can share all of my videos and pictures of Spokane, because when I was here doing the research, I was taking pictures constantly. So then on my YouTube channel, I can introduce people to Spokane. And I found that's been going really well, because people read the books and they want to see, well, you say the Campbell House was real, what does it look like? And then they go watch this video, and then I get comments saying, wow, it looks exactly like, that's how I pictured it. That's so cool. And then I'm able to share my research, and then I started reaching out to other authors and interviewing them as well. Because I feel like it should be reciprocal, right? So I will interview you, and then they interview me. And we've built some incredible relationships that way. We've got some really close friends now that are they started as reviewers of our books, and now they're really close friends, and it only took a year. So yeah, I would say YouTube is our main marketing right now, our own personal YouTube channels, and then just constantly reaching out to reviewers. Hey, will you read this? And usually, the first book is the hardest one, getting that into their hands, and then it goes in their TBR, and it's, their TBR is huge. And so if I can get them to actually read it, and they love it, then they'll read everything that I write. So I just got that built-in network now. Yeah.
What do you expect from a beta reader?
Ooh, yeah. So beta readers, early on, so I had never heard of a beta reader. And we were listening to this podcast called Writing Excuses, and if you've never listened to it, I highly recommend it. It's Sanderson, Brandon Sanderson, who's a famous author of epic fantasy, right? He is like the George R.R. Martin of the next generation. He has taken over fantasy. And if you've never read his books, I highly recommend them. They're very, very good, and very unique. And he started a podcast, and they were on like season 10, and they decided to make it a masterclass in writing. And while they were talking about their process, he revealed that, well, one of the other people that he was with, Dan Wells, who's also an author, he writes like more horror type fantasy, and Dan Wells is in his critique group, and Dan admitted to the public that Brandon's first drafts are terrible. They're terribly written. And it was mind-boggling to me. It literally blew my mind that a famous New York Times best-selling author writes crappy first drafts. It was like, oh, so it doesn't just come out perfect. Like, wow. Who knew? So, they started talking about, well, how do you go from crappy first draft to New York Times published author? And they said they use beta readers. Okay, so what's a beta reader? And beta readers are basically a developmental editor for free. We started with friends and family and reaching out to them, and then I actually reached out to a bunch of people. There was a group on Facebook called the Spokane History Buffs, was what it used to be called. I think it's called something else now. And it's people like yourself in Spokane who love Spokane's history. The Westerners group is another one that meets, and they talk about Spokane's history. And I was like, well, I'm writing a book about Spokane's history. Will you guys read this for me and just tell me what you think? And then I have a lot of expert readers, too, that read my books to make sure that, like, the history is accurate and that the blacksmith is accurate and things like that. And so my beta readers, they are how I developmental edit. I don't pay for a developmental edit. I don't pay for a content edit. I use my beta readers, and that is about 30 people who read my books ahead of time. And I have them broken up into groups. And so I have my alpha readers, which is my editor and my husband. So I finish my first draft. I have them read it and tell me what are the big problems, right? And I have, like, the second book, Cupboards All Bared. My editor came back and was like, okay, there's some major issues with one of your characters. So I had to completely rewrite him. So, okay, that's a huge rewrite. But luckily, it came in the alpha read, right? So then I send it out to my beta readers, and I have about 10 top of my first beta readers. And those are the people who, they're looking for those bigger problems. They're big mystery readers. They like history. And they point out those kinds of problems with my story. I do not send it to people like my mother who are proofreaders. So she is one of the last group of beta readers. And those are the 10 people that I trust who are going to catch some of the nitpicky stuff. They notice those things. Because one of the things I've realized is everybody's a different type of reader, right? Some people are going to notice those big problems. And some people get caught up in proofreading, right? I am a proofreader at heart. So I cannot read my husband's books when they first come out because they're a mess. But he reads them out loud to me, and I can hear then the big picture. And that's how I got into audiobooks, was because proofreading would drive me nuts. Traditionally published books have gotten really bad at editing. So good job, self-pub. We're kicking it up. Showing them how it should be done. So I go through different processes with beta readers. What I end up sending them is the ABCDs. I am looking for what is amazing, what is boring, what is confusing, and what you didn't believe. And what's fun is, like in Anna Katharine Green. So Anna Katharine Green, the quote that I ended up putting in the front of the book, she said, "I have found that the incidents in books which people pick out as improbable are the very ones which are founded on fact. Truth is stranger than fiction." And she wrote that in an article called Why Human Beings Are Interested in Crime. And I felt like that was a summation of this book. When I sent this book out to beta readers, the things that they thought were improbable were straight out of the horse's mouth. Like Anna Katharine Green had literally said that. Or there was an article where it said that, this actually happened. And this is what, this is how it came to be. I'm like, nope. That part's true. Was there anything else you didn't believe? Like this thing over here that I made up? Nope, that they totally believed. So that's why that's the fourth thing that I asked them. So A for amazing, B for boring, C for confusing, D for didn't believe. And that has been really good. It gets them kind of thinking while they're reading. Some of them are cheerleaders. My dad is my cheerleader. He reads my book and he says, "This is the best book I've ever read. It's so wonderful. You should publish it right away." And that's not always true. So, but having those different groups of readers has been really, really helpful. Because then by the time it gets to my editor, he's like, "Wow, this is really clean." I'm like, "Yeah, because beta readers." So, yeah.
Two questions. ABCs one more time? I'm
Yes,
writing this down.
yes.
I got amazing, boring,
Confusing.
confusing. That was the one I missed. Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I just wanted
Yeah,
to
no, that's okay. And then didn't believe.
Didn't believe.
Yeah. I feel like I come up with-
My main question though
Yeah.
is, you mentioned you're doing a school workshop.
Yes,
Was that high school or elementary?
it is high school.
High school, okay.
Yes, yeah, this time. Yeah.
So I just had a quick question about that. A couple of years ago, I started trying to get into doing that.
Mhm.
And just had a lot of trouble finding research on what was done. And did you make your own program up, or is there a resource you can share?
Yeah, I just made it up. So I usually give a presentation and then we do a workshop. And so for this particular one, she actually reached out to me and said, could you give them a writing prompt? And then we'll work on that together. And I thought, yeah, that's great. So they're sending them to me already. I'm going to read them this weekend. But I told them, 1,000 words, because I thought, okay, well, if they want to read it aloud and share it, it needs to be short enough that they can read it. And we'll still have time to talk about it. And right now we've got 10 students signed up, so I've received 4 of them, so we'll see. But all 4 of them then pinged the teacher, and the teacher reached out to me. She said, just so you know, all of them asked why it only had to be 1,000 words. Could they go beyond that? And she said, I'm just so excited by how excited they're getting about writing. And I thought that's the goal, right? That's the goal, is to get them excited. Because what I set them was a historical research one. They wanted a Halloween prompt. So I gave them a historical one. I said, look up the history of Halloween or crazy stories that happened on Halloween in the past, right? I mean, there's a lot of them, especially locally. and then write a short 1,000-word story inspired by that, right? And I gave them a list of a few things that I was like, okay, so these are things that I like to keep in mind. One of them is that history is built on character. So character plus history equals historical fiction. Your historical fiction should be character-driven, because that's who makes up history, is the characters, is the people. And I have found that that's why people love my books, that their first comment is, this is character-driven historical fiction. So it's not about the plot. It's not about moving forward in history. It's not about how this person went on to do whatever. It's about the characters experiencing life in 1901. So they feel drawn into that time period. And I feel like part of that is because I chose to do a month per book. So I feel like I can take the time to say, okay, this book is going to focus on, like I said, the 4th one is about gambling and baseball. So I can really focus on what did July 1901, so really specific, look like for my characters. And all of my books take place over at least 4 days, sometimes a little bit longer. And that way, again, I can look at the Spokane Review articles and get really specific and say, okay, what was happening in Spokane on these days? And so, this murder happened, and this thief was happening, and so then I can tie it in and have my detectives, talking to the other detectives about real things that was happening, but really focused on what they were experiencing. Like in October of 1901, there's going to be a culling of the police force. They're going to cut back at the police force down to a really smaller number. And so that's something that they can be experiencing in my books. We've all experienced work problems right now, right? I mean, there's been, it's nothing new under the sun, right? In our modern day, people are having problems finding jobs, there's unemployment, and they're cutting back on the police force, even today, right? So having them experiencing that and talking about that and just bringing that humanity back to history. So I told them that was something that they needed to focus on. So we'll see what they pop up with. But yeah, that's what I'm doing this time. This is my first time doing a workshop with the presentation. I've done presentations, but we'll see how it goes. So yeah, I think come up with something fun, something that excites you, because if it excites you, it's going to excite them. Yeah.
When you're on YouTube, do you write or do you read chapters from your book or parts of your
I have
book?
done that, yes. Originally, that's what I was doing, was posting live readings and things like that. And what I found was people were more interested in the writing process. People love to hear how you write, because we all write differently, right? As an indie author, I know you've come across people saying, well, this is how you write, right? You have to outline your book. If you don't outline your book, then you're just crazy, right? And then other people say, oh, how can you outline? It's so restricting. I have to pants it, right? I have to just write it by the seat of my pants. And what you'll find is, everybody's different. Everybody writes differently. And so I try to really encourage authors with that, and especially young authors, something I want to talk to the students about is, go out there and find out what works for you. because what works for me is actually a little of both. I write an outline, but then I kind of pants each part of my outline, right? So it's a little bit of both. And then I have research thrown in too. So I research, and that inspires the outline, but that's what works for me. Might not work for everybody. So, yeah. Sorry, got really dry. Talking about my writing process is a big thing that I do on YouTube. Other authors love to hear how you're writing, and because then they're inspired by that. They're like, oh, that's a unique idea. I've never heard of that. Like what I'm doing right now. So, yeah. I do enjoy doing readings too, especially with the with the historical books. I love sharing those and then putting pictures with it. So like reading the description of him walking through the Campbell house and cupboards all bared, and then showing pictures from the Campbell house with that. So that way, they're reading this portion and then picturing it just like it actually is in there. Sharing, okay, so this is the dress I'm describing, right? Here's a dress from the Met that she's wearing in this book. Or here's something that I found in the Sears Roebuck catalog from 1902, which is the one that came out like for 1901. It's all backwards. But I have a 1902 Sears Roebuck. And so my characters can literally shop in it, right? And I can make sure they're wearing things that they would have been able to buy at that time. Or I have them often reading articles in the Spokesman. So they can read something in the Spokesman and it can come straight out of there. And using all of that. So, yeah.
Thank you.